Well, our special speaker for a short presentation tonight is Gary Ross. He was not long ago the president of this august body. He says that he is the Lord of Kissing Rock Farm. I have yet to see him go out and kiss the rock.
That's it. That's a challenge. That's it. I've never done it, but now I'm going to do it.
You need to, if you're going to say this about yourself. Everything subsequent to such things has been downhill, he says. Tonight, his presentation is called In Search of Omega Centauri II.
I would like to thank Bill Beers for the long-term inspiration for this. You remember the discussion we had at the picnic a couple of years ago. We sat in the pavilion, and Bill said to me, and this, naturally, there is no commission which I cannot take, expand upon, and turn obscene, right? He said that he liked to hear less about quantum physics and more about, quote, pretty things in the sky.
Amen.
That's right.
Yes.
Right, there it is. So I practiced the old religion, the old amateur astronomy, kind of thing that drew me into this during the second Eisenhower administration. And I have not changed an iota. And now, Bill Beers has ratified this, so I'm going to be really insufferable in the future now. You know, sometimes it's not what you see, it's what you try to see. And it's called spiritual growth. Now, the headline is, what I'm about to describe to you, comrades, is a débat. That is the French. Now, if you're British and can mangle the pronunciation of anything, it's called a debacle. After all, Worcestershire sauce is Worcester sauce in Britain. Why can't the English learn to speak? But this is a digression. Now, one of my minor obsessions, amongst my major obsessions, amongst my inamorate, is finding Omega Centauri. The first time I saw Omega was in 1968, no longer truly young, and I had to get a star chart to find it naked eye. It was from the latitude of Central Florida, but that's another story. Omega Centauri is a fascinating object. Some say, people like Bailey, that Omega Centauri is not a true globular cluster, but the remnant of the core of a galaxy which collided with us and then was stripped of its outer stars. He says these things, but I don't listen. To me, it is still the most magnificent globular cluster in the sky. And I haven't learned a new thing since Nixon's first administration, and I like it like that because it uncomplicates my life. As the rabbi says in Fiddler on the Roof, if you want to give me bad news, tell me about the flood. Some data. It has an NGC designation. For those of you back in the nosebleed seats, tough luck. This is the largest I could reasonably make my lettering. That's what you get for buying the cheap seats. Maybe you should invest in some opera glasses. New General Catalog 5139. It is a big globular cluster, galactic core remnant, whatever you want to call it. All right, fine. Diameter 36 minutes of arc, that's over 1/2 degree. Now, of course, to the naked eye, it looks much smaller than that, because this includes the outer reaches of the globular cluster. The 36 minutes is a pretty big hunk of sky.
Same as the moon, right?
It's bigger than the moon, because I think the moon maxes out at 33 or 32 minutes. Can anybody help me with that? Something like that? All right, at apogee? Perigee. I'm sorry. Approximately. And its visual magnitude is 3.7, which is why Bayer gave it a Greek letter designation, because when it was plotted, the thing was reasonably thought to be a star, albeit maybe a little on the fuzzy side. Given the keenness of observations of the Arab astronomers and the Chinese, and I am not an expert on historical astronomy, I have a tough time believing that they, at their lower latitudes, did not think that there was something wrong with that star, because it distinctly lacks any crispness. You know, I've seen it from low latitudes, and it does not twinkle. Now, its integrated spectral signature is F7, which is pretty late spectral classification, but then globular clusters are redder objects on the whole. And Class 8, according to Shapley and Sawyer, 1927, when they published their classification. Class 1 means that the stars in a globular cluster are rather heavily condensed. And so Class 8, it's 1 through 10, means that that Omega is relatively diffuse, as a globular would go. And I'm sure that there is some interesting work done recently on what kind of mechanism would be necessary and how long it would take to strip a captured galaxy down to the point where something has that density, that cross-face density. I don't know of these things. I don't examine the literature. Now, the declination of this thing is well down there for we mid-latitude observers. As I have indicated here, approximately, arguendo, 47.5 degrees south of the celestial equator. The Michigan-Indiana border is that. Now, methinks visions of sugar plums. I have heard stories through Dr. Parton and from others that Canadian observers have seen Omega Centauri from Ontario.
Point Peely.
Point Peely.
What did I just say? I was getting to that. Thank you. Point Peely is not the farthest south point in Canada. It isn't. The farthest south point in Canada is Small Island, which is just north of the international border in the middle of Lake Erie. Nobody lives on Small Island. I have never heard of anybody who's gone to Small Island. So these observations were made from Point Peely. I have my doubts but it might be possible. It is mathematically possible. It is geographically possible. And I'm thinking maybe it could be meteorologically possible. It has fired my imagination for a long time. Moving right along. But my mission, should I choose to accept it, is to take advantage of the latitude of the Michigan-Indiana border and see what I could do from high and dry land in the Great Lakes state. The sea horizon at the Michigan-Indiana border is south of the position of Omega Centauri. I'm reminded of the line from Death of a Salesman. As the uncle says to Biff, he said, "When I was a young man, I had a rather erroneous view of geography. I started out for Alaska, but wound up in Africa. When I went into the jungle, I was 18. When I was 21, I came out, and by God, I was rich." This is a different story. Now, we have the advantage, because I'm of the educated class, I know of refractive lift, approximately 1/2 degree. So, objects on the horizon will be lifted an additional 1/2 degree, thus making all of this simple, right? Wrong. On the night of the 15th of May, 1998, I got really drunk. It was Friday night. What is there to do on the farm, right? You sit and drink alone. It was a disgrace. The next morning, I woke up sharp as a tack. Because overnight, a cold front had come through. And on Saturday morning, it was brilliantly blue sky. I had at my disposal a 1993 6-cylinder fire engine red Pontiac Grand Am. And I ruled. I was going to go in search of Omega Centauri. So I cannibalized a 6-inch f6 reflector from the Veen Observatory. I just took the optical assembly, threw it in the car, got cleaned up from the night before, which was a major excavation, put on a coat and tie so that I would impress the natives, so that they know that I just wasn't some vagabundo, right? And headed south on US 131. Here, this is for scale. Sort of for scale, right? This is known as Party Town up there, U of M Biological Station. I will have an audience tomorrow evening with the new president of the University of Michigan in Grand Rapids. And I will tell him, open your wallet and support that institution. But I digress. All right.
Gary, can we get this framed?
No, I'll give it to you. Right, I will give it to you. Do I have to put the Upper Peninsula in too?
Yes, please.
That place should belong to Wisconsin anyway, or even Ontario. So this is the lay of the land. I was going to be like Balboa, going over the crest of the Darien and looking down and discovering the South Sea. Only in this case, I was going to discover Omega Centauri while keeping both feet planted firmly on the north side of the Michigan-Indiana border. Well, I started out. The sky was magnificent. I stopped. I stopped in Cass County because there was a Main Street restaurant with a Saturday night all-you-can-eat spaghetti. And I destroyed that buffet table, right? I just ate like a pig, and then paid my bill and headed south. 10 minutes ahead of the police.
But you paid your bill.
At twilight, I started to notice something mildly unpleasant. To the west, what did I spy? A certain muddiness on the western horizon. This is after the sun had set. It was a little gunky down there, I thought. That's the filth from Chicago blowing over, going toward Muskegon, where it belongs. But finally it got dark. Now, I had the transit time of Omega Centauri calculated for me by the late, great Bruce P. Seidel in Grand Rapids, my buddy out there, now sadly years gone. So I knew when Omega was going to transit late on the night of the 16th through the 17th of May. I got down to a county road that paralleled the Michigan-Indiana border and had another nasty surprise. The Indiana toll road is extremely close to the border at that point, and there are two huge interchanges nicely spaced on either side of my point of view. In fact, from the border itself, one could see the luminaires just above the trees. All right, somewhat discouraged, I drove to downtown Sturgis and caught a few winks in the car. Waking up in enough time to take up position on this county road, straddling as best I could, going up and down, trying to get the best position away from those damned interchanges with those sodium vapor lights. I put the 6-inch reflector on the trunk of the car, mounted on a sleeping bag, because I'm looking at the horizon, a low-power eyepiece. I had my 1950s era Skelnate Plazo 100% analog star charts, which makes me so puissant at the telescope. None of this in 1998. None of this open the pod bay doors, Hal. Right? This is during the Clinton years when men were men, and you know what I mean about that. Oh yes, God, I envy him. Anyway, so I'm scanning back and forth and back and forth. I know exactly where that cluster is. Exactly. Back and forth, carefully, carefully. I know exactly where it is, and I can't see it. 2 things. 3 things. Number 1, by the time I came to the fruition of this charge into the valley of death, this cirriform haze was now completely over southwest Michigan from the west. No, it was not filth from Chicago. It was another weather system coming in. Number 2, I discovered, finally, that there are no such thing as dark skies in southern Michigan outside the thumb. There's no such animal as a truly dark sky. We're down here in farm country. You look at a map of southwest Michigan, northwest Indiana. There are no dark skies there anymore. No. And then there is the small amount, or should I say, the totally killing amount of atmospheric extinction at a low elevation site. And we're talking about southwest Michigan and northwest Indiana. There's too much atmospheric and aerosol extinction at that point to see anything down that low in declination. It is truly impossible. We've had sort of this discussion before about how high one would have to get to see what to minimize extinction. There is no way I'm going to see this thing at that elevation in that kind of country with the relative humidity, the Rayleigh scattering, on top of the no dark skies and the new weather system that's coming in. I did not see squat. So, with the moon glow on the horizon, a late rising gibbous moon, I turned north again, tail well placed between my legs, and went back home, having not seen Omega Centauri. I will never attempt anything like that again. There is a moral to this. Do not get stinkeroony the night before you come up with this glorious idea to show everybody else how it's done, right? So, as I said to Dr. Park, it could have been worse. I could have been like Charles the Rash of Burgundy, who in the 15th century charged out in bad weather against a superior enemy and wound up practically naked in a snowbank, stripped of his black Italian armor. Quite dead.
Gary, I think we will continue your discourse, continue enjoying it while we're having snacks. Anything
Why, you
else?
want me to keep talking? That's my story.